Hello and welcome to the 90 Minute Fever podcast with Steve and Nick. For those of you who don't know who we are, I am Steve in Game, one of the admins. I'm manager of Strictly Buttside Up in the Twilight FA. And I am joined as ever by Nick, who is the lead developer of 90 Minute Fever. This is the 13th podcast in the series. We hope you enjoyed our previous ones. If you are interested in the previous podcasts, they are all available on the ISOCron YouTube channel. So in today's podcast, we are going to be discussing some very big news that's happening right now, pretty much. And this is the massive changes to the way the transfer system works and the associated removal of the Reborn Legends feature. So, Nick, shall we get straight into it and kick things off?
Yeah, I think so. It might just be worth a quick mention first that good news for us, at least, that we've managed to convince yourself, Steve, to be more involved in this project. So we've been, I don't know what the word is, stalking maybe. We've been on Steve for a long time now to try to get him more involved. Obviously, you've been involved in, doing various bits and some that, users are definitely aware of, like the Twitch streams and these podcasts and stuff. But we really wanted to have Steve much more, as involved in the project as he possibly could be, basically. And I think just his life circumstances didn't really allow it before, but he's decided to rearrange his life circumstances and be more involved. So it's very good news for us, and we're very happy. And I think it'll make a positive difference, a big positive difference down the stretch. And I guess for this podcast specifically, it's probably a bit different to normal in that you're much more aware of these changes, why they were made, were involved in the decision-making process for maybe not everything, because some of this was made quite some time ago, and some of it, more recently. But I think you're just much more, actually involved in the changes, in the actual changes themselves, and being involved in the process to decide them. So I think it's a bit different in that you might have more to add than normal, possibly. Don't you?
Oh, yeah, we'll see. Maybe. I'll try my best. It's great. It's great to be more involved. Find it very interesting to get my teeth into some of the stuff. I'm glad I've got a bit more time to spend on it. People probably might have noticed in my league that I've been on online a little bit less in the last week. That's because I've been using a lot of my last weeks. I meant to say just. Been trying to get more involved and trying to spend some of my spare time helping out, and I think some very interesting times ahead, I think. But let's talk about what we actually mean to talk about on this podcast. Well, really, this is pretty big news, but the thing you need to look at first for the listeners is take a look at the forum if you haven't already. I'm sure you probably have if you're listening to this. If you haven't, it's very important that you read the post on the forum that we've had outlining what is effectively a major change here. So we've made some big changes to how the whole transfer system works. We're not going to go through everything about that because that's what the forum post does. It tells you the general things that have happened. We've also released a Q&A post answering what we think is hopefully most of the questions that you guys will ask. So please do take a read through that and get yourself acquainted with how it's generally going to work. What we're actually going to talk about today is more about the actual impacts and how it's going to, a little bit more in detail for those who are more interested. So Nick, I guess best place to start is to talk about the transition. Do you think, and how it's going to change in the next?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, because obviously the change is huge. It's going to impact stuff, and there's going to be some time before things sort of get back to status quo, if you like. And in that sort of interim period, at the end of the day, it's going to be a bit rocky. There's not really a lot that can be done about that, quite frankly. So I think it might just be worth acknowledging the fact that there will be a transition, and we're going to have to go through it. We do expect that the game will be different. I think there was a lot of, I think maybe artificial is even the right word here, but there was a lot of artificial things done to the transfer system in order to sort of make it work with how users value players and to try to encourage transfer activity. And I think a really good example of this is maybe the best example in regards to one of the biggest things that's going to change here is that we needed to do things in order for there to be any demand or any desire at all to want to own older players. And that resulted in us doing things like, really drastically reducing their wages, and also doing things like really inflating the wages for what realistically really should be paid for youth players who realistically should just have lower wages. But we've had to inflate those wages to try to create demand for non-youth players, because so many people are only interested in youth players that we had to sort of do these artificial things in order for people to be more happy with the fact that they've got these older players and that anybody in the entire game might be interested in them. And it's not obviously good if nobody wants any players except for youth players. So in order to make the whole thing work, things had to be done in order to create demand in older players, in order to sort of help better spread the demand for younger players. And that's all out the window, basically, because we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to guarantee that you own an older player, Steve, so that you will be able to sell him to another user. We don't have to artificially create that scenario for you anymore, because it will just happen out the box, because you will just be able to sell the player whenever you want. We don't have to make other users interested in your player, so to speak, in order for that to happen. We can strip all this artificialness, I guess you could call it, out of the wage system in particular, and make it much more realistic from the perspective that better players get paid more wages. Just because a player happens to be older doesn't mean that he's not entitled to be paid any wages, no matter how good he is, which is basically how the system works now. It's more realistic in that if you got good players, you would have to pay them wages. And at the end of the day, if you've got older players and you're not happy to actually pay the wages, then you can just sell them and you get some money for them. And under most circumstances, far more than what you would at present anyway. In regards to younger players, at the end of the day, it's still a free market in regards to, especially the youth, in regards to signing them. At the end of the day, they're still going to go for whoever's willing to pay the most, basically, which is how it works now. But the wages will be lower across the board for younger players. So in essence, a lot of things will impact here. I think one of the bigger things really is that people who have primarily focused on youth or placed a large emphasis on youth, their wage bill is just going to be much lower now than what it was before, so they'll be able to improve their squad more. I think generally speaking, the youth players themselves now, with how it all works, there's far less sort of speculation involved in selling. So you sell a player because he's good. So if you buy a younger player who isn't good and you pay a lot of money for them, you're likely really only to be able to actually sell them for a profit under the new system when you actually have made them good. Whereas now there's it's very how the transfer market now works now, or how it did work. You could basically sell any player for any price. Huge amounts of speculation involved in youth players, and obviously that paved the way for a lot of cheating to take place as well. But that will be out the window. So you still be able to buy younger players and sell them for a profit, but you actually have to develop them into a good player, as opposed to just buy a 15-year-old youth player and then sell him the very next day for double the money as soon as you sign him, kind of thing.
Yeah. So the new system, I guess, is going to benefit people who really like to train up their players to either for use in their own team or for selling effectively. So it's going to reward that kind of gameplay, I guess.
Yeah, and also make it much more rewarding, and also it will the bar or the barrier to entry is really high at the moment to play the game that way, and it's going to lower the bar a lot. So there's a lot of people who don't really have access to play the game that way, who will now have access to play the game that way, because you won't have to pay the ridiculous wages for the youth players, basically, which for a new user is off the cards as an option, basically. You might have saved the X million in order to buy the youth player, but that's not enough, because you won't be able to afford his wages even if you can afford the transfer fee, basically. Whereas under the new system, you save the money, you can buy the youth player, and his wages aren't going to bankrupt you, basically. Now, should he turn into a fantastic player, his wage demand will go up, and if he's dominating or whatever, then you'll have to pay more wages, but then you'd also be able to sell him for a good price. So essentially you're confronted with just good options, really, generally speaking. I mean, if you buy players and their wages do go up, it almost certainly means that the transfer value has gone up. So you're just confronted with, really, if I choose to pay this player more wages, then I'm doing so in the knowledge that I could have chosen to have sold him for a profit instead, sort of thing. So I can keep my great player who helps me win, but I have to pay him more wages, but he's worth more and no one could sell him anymore for a profit, type of thing. So I think it creates good situations there. I think the other big impact is on the other end of the spectrum here, which is right now, if the older players, no matter how much we do to artificially try to create demand for them, at the end of the day, there's just way less demand for them than for youth players. Way less. Way less. And it's possible to assemble quite a competitive squad as long as you're happy to only have older players. And you can pick up 30, 31, 32-year-olds that are pretty good and pay almost nothing for them and pay minimum wages for them. And you could do that, but now you can't. I think largely, people did that just to pocket the money so that eventually, eventually you could transition into having enough money to actually be able to enter this other market of youth players, because the barrier to entry was so high that you had to make sacrifices over a long period of time, like playing a bunch of older players that you don't really want to do, in order to actually be able to sort of enter the non-old players part of the game. But now the barrier to entry is much lower, so you can do that much quicker. It's just not good for the game anyway, that from a balance perspective, that you essentially constantly making a choice between having younger players or winning matches. You shouldn't have to choose between the two.
Okay. Well, let's move on. We're going to. I think we should talk a little bit about. Please. I'll just remind people. Please have a good read through the posts to, so you know a little bit about what we're talking about when we're going through this. But the new transfer system is covered in great detail there. But I was going to talk about the old transfer system a little bit. We were talking earlier about some of the crazy rules that are in place there. I don't know whether anyone really realises just how complicated and convoluted the system is. But if you actually sit back and think about it, I mean, I don't know. Do you want to just quickly go through some of the ridiculous things that are in here?
Yeah,
they might not sound ridiculous in themselves, but when you just add it all up, it's just crazy complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. There's just a lot of. I mean, obviously the bit where you make a transfer bid and then you receive one and you accept or reject it, or that type of thing, like that stuff. Even though they're rules, they're kind of largely intuitive. They're not complicated. So ignoring, all of that side of it, but there's a lot of things that just aren't that intuitive at all to do with it. Like, for example, when you reject transfer bids, it impacts the market value of the player and the wage demand of the player, depending on how quickly you reject the transfer bid. That's just not intuitive at all. There's a penalty with withdrawing transfer bids. That's not something you would intuitively be aware of before you made it. The whole sort of auto accept and auto reject functionality is to a degree it's intuitive, but it's also, you get a lot of questions about it. A lot of people just don't understand it. There's all different types of negotiations that have all their own different rules, like youth negotiations, free agent negotiations, transfer negotiations, contract release negotiations, and they all have slightly different rules to each other. There's rules that you got to pay compensation to a player if you've owned them for less than 30 days when you release them. Again, like not intuitive that you would naturally know that before you sign the player, that you might not be able to just release him straight away. During the last 24 hours of the season, the rules kind of changed, like you can't release players from contract or bid for players or anything. Separate to that, you can't make transfer bids for the last 48 hours of the season. You're unable to make a bid for a player that's owned by another user who has already been transferred during this season, with the exception that you can during the closed season. There's all restrictions between users, like the 30-day rule. You can't have multiple active bids for players from the same club at the same time. There's a 24-hour rejected bid rule where you can't make a bid for another player from the same club if you had a bid rejected by that club in the past 24 hours. You can report bids received for your own players. That then triggers a whole bunch of separate functionality and options for you. You can put auctions that are in progress. You can invoke automatic transfer blocks if you want between yourself and other users. The transfer system will automatically do it based on reports as well. Oh gosh, then there's more. There's the initial bit of wage discount, the initial bit of waiving of the signing fee. The initial bid is not able to actually withdraw their transfer negotiation bid, which is something that catches the users out particularly. There's a separate 28-day rule for the Reborn Legends automatically getting released from contract. There's all the functionality around the transfer deadline and the fact that everything works differently for the first weeks of the season compared to the last week. There's all sorts of odd situations that can occur, like where a transfer bid could result in the player being transferred during the current season or possibly the next season when you make the bid, and you won't know what's going to happen because it's dependent on exactly when the user responds to the bid, if that makes sense. So you can make the bid, and then depending on whether they respond to it with more than 24 hours before the transfer deadline or after the 24 hours before the transfer deadline, the auction would then complete before or after the transfer deadline, which would then mean that the player would be transferred before or after the transfer deadline. There's this concept of a limited user status, which some people may not even be aware of because it only impacts new users, where they can't actually make any transfer bids at all. And then there's a lot of complications around the whole projected transaction side of things with how all of these interactions work as well, because you make a bid and you may or may not get the player, but it's still coming out of your projected funds, and that is not intuitive to a lot of people, basically. That is just conceptually how it works. They can't quite wrap their head around it. And I don't know, I think it's enough. Do we need more?
Yeah, I think that'll do for now, Nick. Yeah, I'm sure there probably are many more, but it's definitely it's not fit for purpose. You shouldn't. I think you've said this previously. You shouldn't need some kind of degree to actually work out the rules of this game, should you? It's not exactly pick up and play. So you want the new user experience to be for people to understand the game, don't you? When you first use it, and currently it really does take some effort to understand it all, doesn't it? So,
I mean, it's an unreasonable ask. What the amount of effort that we ask of people in order to start playing this game, and it's just really complicated. Honestly, like who even knew everything that I just said? As a percentage of all of the users, it'd be a tiny percentage of the user base, I'd imagine, that would actually be aware of all of those rules, and there's more as well, by the way. But it's not that it's complicated, it's that it's convoluted. I think to some degree having some complications is okay, but I think if you are going to have them, they need to be intuitive and they need to be serving a very specific purpose. Whereas a lot of these rules are not intuitive at all, and they also aren't really serving. Many of them aren't really serving any specific. They're only serving the purpose under the guise of trying to encourage certain types of behaviour, but they're not actually doing something extremely. They're not adding extra gameplay. Basically, I think you can have a bit of complication when I say it's doing something specific. I meant doing something specific in regards to enhancing the gameplay experience, giving you more gameplay. But none of these things really give you any more gameplay. They just create complications for you to try to understand that don't actually make the game any better for you. They're just trying to encourage certain types of behaviour and trying to, on the most part, really, some of them are trying to encourage behaviour or they're trying to curb cheating. That's pretty much the two buckets that all of this falls under. But I don't know, even with the encouraging certain types of behaviour, that comes with the downfall that people will, the more it's like you try to encourage a certain type of behaviour, it will make many people even more angry when people don't adhere to that behaviour that you're trying to encourage, if that makes sense. So if you're not responding to your transfer bids, and then we add some functionality that gives you an incentive to respond to those transfer bids, and then you still don't respond to those transfer bids, it makes people even more angry that you're not doing it, not less, if that makes sense. So all we can do is provide you with an incentive to want to do it, but at the end of the day, these things, in the most part, are just incentives, and you still have your own free will to decide what you want to do. And if your free will basically is that I want to piss people off as much as possible, then you have a lot of scope to piss a lot of people off. I'm absolutely certain that we have users that get a lot of enjoyment out of this game because they get to upset other people, and I'm sure these people get creative and find other ways, but I think a lot of the obvious ways that and the more obvious things they could do. It's all gone now. It's going to be very hard for people to just negatively impact your personal playing experience now.
Okay, Nick. So how about? I mean, we've talked a bit about the transfer system being, incredibly useful, just stopping cheating completely. But I mean, the transfer system has got a lot of good things about it just by itself, hasn't it? I mean, if you think about the way you can instantly do things now, this new system's got to work really well for a lot of users, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I know so. It definitely will work better for many, many users. I mean, it's much more like you're in control of your own destiny, which I think is a very important thing to feel in a game like this, rather than feeling like your destiny is sort of outside of your hands and it's in the hands of lady luck and the whim of other people and things like that. And in this system, you have a huge amount of control over your destiny, and I think that's just a really positive thing, that if you put the effort in, you are rewarded under this system.
Yeah.
You spend the 3 hours to find the player that is perfect for you with the price that you're happy with, and you get him. Full stop. I mean, it really is that simple, and it isn't that simple at all. I mean, it wasn't under the previous system. You could spend 20 hours finding the perfect player that nobody else found, and it's been sitting on the transfer list or something like that for weeks or longer even, and you wouldn't end up with him potentially.
Yeah, because I guess it just adds so much visibility when it's in the negotiations, doesn't it? So this way, you put the work in, you get the reward effectively.
Yeah, and there's no reason. I mean, there's obviously reasons why it was like it was, and that, again, it was largely around the fact that if you just made it so that you could transfer list your player for 100k and anybody else could just sweep in and instantly buy them, then obviously that would just be farcical in regards to cheating. So, but that's gone, and now you can have people putting the effort in, finding the players for the prices they want, and just swooping in and buying them, and there is no negative downside to that. And because of the fact that you can do things in this instant type way, it's beyond simply just feeling rewarded somewhat for putting the effort in and finding a player. It's beyond the fact that when you have to wait 24 hours to potentially or even probably not get the player, which is frustrating. Beyond all of that, just the fact that things do happen instantly, not for you, but for everybody in the whole game, it makes everything so much more dynamic and thriving. And it's like you could be looking for a player now and not find anybody for the price that you want, but you could log out and come back 2 hours later and find somebody that you're interested in, because everything could have changed in just a few hours. Potentially, well, not literally, everything will have literally changed from the perspective that all of the players that were available, they will either have been purchased or they will not have been purchased, and if they haven't been purchased, their price will have gone down. If you're talking about a few hours, it will be gone down somewhat, but if you're talking about 12 hours or coming back the next day, 24 hours, the prices will have changed a lot. And also, because of that, and the instant nature of it, other users will be instantly buying players, and therefore they will also instantly be selling players, because nobody's just going to buy and never ever sell a player, right? So generally speaking, if for every player you buy, Steve, by and large, you're going to sell one player, like, more or less, right? It's pretty much the ratio. So every time you've had a look and found someone you're happy with and bought a player, you've also added another player back for other people to potentially be interested in. That will make it so that things do change on an hour-to-hour basis a fair bit, especially compared to now. Right now, on an hour-to-hour basis, not a lot really happens if you're talking at that type of time frame. And even from one day to the next, not a huge lot. I mean, you look at the negotiations, that's it, really, right? Have a quick look at the negotiations, that's it. But if you're talking about looking at the players in the game, like for example the free agents or the transfer list of players or whatever, not a lot changes on an hour-to-hour or a day-to-day basis, hardly anything. But that would all changed now. So now it'll be rewarding to look, and it will be rewarding every time you look, potentially, whether that's multiple times in the same day, whether that's every day, and especially if you're getting to the realms of every other day or something, like pretty much it will just be like you're looking at a completely different list if you're talking about a couple of days in between.
Yeah, I think the thing I particularly like is that let's face it, we all try and continually improve, but as you get further and further, towards the top of the game, you any improvements are more marginal, aren't they? I think because you've reached a certain level and you're trying to just get that little extra edge on your other experienced competitors you're playing with. So I think the fact that you see a player you like in who's coming down towards a price that you like in the market, and then you can just say, right, I'm going to have to sell this player quickly to improve him to get this guy. So you quickly sell him, get the cash, buy a player, done. That benefits everyone because you've bought a player, you've sold a player into the market, so someone else might be interested in. It's just a lot of it's just very fluid, isn't it? I like it.
Fluid and cutthroat as well. I think it will still have its own frustrations in that obviously you could have your eye on this player that you want and he's say 2 million or something. You're like, well, I'm just going to wait till he gets down to 1.9 and then I'm going to buy him, and then somebody comes in gallantly and buys him for 2 million, and then you're like, oh man, I would have happily paid 2 million. I was just being stupid. Why was I waiting? I'm going to fall foul of that so many times. I'm so tight, Nick. I'll end up missing out on players because I'll just wait that little bit longer. No, I can save a couple 100,000 here. No, wait. But I think you will be, but I think the feeling behind that is just very different because it was all your own fault. It was because you could have bought him, you chose not to, you missed out. Nobody else's fault. Your fault, only your fault. You just got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, if I'm going to be tight, then that's the consequence. Going to miss out sometimes.
Absolutely. I can see it being very interesting in the youth market, for example, when your players are coming in and you've got your eye on quite a few of them. You maybe got a few options, but nobody's bitten yet. Nobody's actually swooped for those ones that you can tell are going to go for a bit of money. Once one of them goes, is it like a domino effect? Do you think that's what I'm thinking? That's what I'm seeing happening here. Someone will buy someone and go, "Oh God, it's getting into that time. I really need to get that other player that I was after before I don't get him as well." I think it could be quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I mean we'll have to see. Obviously, with the youth, it's starting with the prices being very high just for all the youth players, just so we can get a measure of how all of that shapes up. So initially they'll be starting at 100 million, which is obviously ridiculous. Nobody's going to pay that. But the prices for the youth drop even faster than for the other players. So they drop very fast. And just the idea basically is that everybody's going to get a chance to actually, they're going to get at least a few days at the start of the season, no matter how good the players are, to have a look, to get a chance to shortlist and find the ones that they're interested in. That's the idea.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same note, it's just whoever pays the most is going to get the players. It's the same philosophy, I guess you could say, with the youth players now. But I think it's just completely different. Like you're looking at a player and you're like, well, I'll make a speculative bid and I'll wait 24 hours and I'll see what happens. Versus just the guy's here. I could just pay the 5 million and I could just get him, or I don't and I don't. Full stop. It's just there's a click of a button. Do I click it? And I think just the whole feel of that is going to be completely different to bidding 5 million and waiting 24 hours and seeing what everyone else did. Just emotionally, it's going to be so much more of a ride, I think, especially like just that feeling like you have the power, where I think at the moment the transfer system makes you feel oftentimes quite the opposite. It makes you feel quite powerless
I understand what you're saying. I think it's particularly good for newer users or even users that haven't got that much money as well, because they really can get an idea of what they can and can't get. They're not going to tie up their only funds waiting 24 hours for a player they're probably not going to get.
Well, they can keep tabs on 20 players and wait till one of them gets down to the price range they want and buy. Whereas under the previous system, you couldn't do that. You couldn't keep tabs on 20 players. You couldn't make the 20 bids. So, yeah, I think it works. It's just better in regards to the Destiny aspect, I think, and the types of emotions you'll feel. Because I think even when you feel the negative emotions, it'll be a very different type of a negative emotion. It'll be internal frustration, which I think is a better emotion than feeling external frustration. Because at least when it's internal, it was your choice, and you can choose to change your behaviour in the future. If you're constantly missing out,
you learn from it, can't you? Yeah.
If you're missing out on all the youth players, you then can just pay more and get one, or not. But it's your choice, right? Whereas even under the existing system, of course you could have bid more for a youth player because you're missing out on all of them. But it doesn't mean that you would have got him. You might have missed out again. Still, so it's like even if you were getting frustrated because you weren't bidding enough, bidding more doesn't necessarily solve the problem either. So I think it's more cutthroat, honestly, I think, which will make it more thrilling, and being in control of your own destiny will just be much more positive feeling overall.
I mean, not only buying, Nick. I mean, let's have a look at from the other side of things. I mean, buying is clearly very beneficial because you can it's just obvious. You see a player you like, you just buy him straight away. But even the selling side of things, I think, is so much better in this system. It's just, you know how much you're going to get for your player. If it's a value you're happy with, you just sell him. You've got the funds, you can go out and buy somebody. I mean, at the moment, selling's sort of a stressful experience, isn't it? In some ways, it's very difficult to sell a player, and now you'll be able to sell them instantly. So that's clearly a benefit. But also, I mean, to use an example, I had a bid on a player, an auto accept, recently, and I bought him for 250k-ish, something like that, and I got someone paid my auto accept to 1.2 million, I think it is, and rather than experience the emotion where I'm going, oh brilliant, I've just sort of made a great profit on this player, superb, I can add some funds to my hopefully buying someone at the youth auctions. I'm sitting there thinking, God, this guy that's bought is clearly not one of the really active players. I mean, are people going to think I'm cheating? I mean, and is that like really an emotion you really want to have when you've just had a bit of a result, and you should be getting this positive, if you know what I mean. You should be getting a positive experience from that. Whereas I think now, with selling a player, you just instant done. There's no upsets, nothing. You just sold your player for the value that he's worth. Hopefully, if you've done it properly, you maybe trained him up for a few seasons to get the satisfaction going. Right, I've made this player who was really worth nothing into a player that is worth a decent amount of money. I've sold him, and I can now finance this great player that I want to buy in the market. Yeah, so much better.
I mean, I think definitely. I mean, so much better for you, and so much better for many users, because I think it's just, like you said, that's just a horror. You should be feeling good when that happens, and you just don't, and that's not right. And it's also not, there's other elements, like you say, about the inactive user. I mean, the fact is you're always going to have users that are more active than others, some that are less active. We definitely have a category of user who plays the game in a way where they're just really keeping tabs on it, on the development. They're not actively playing, they're just actively keeping tabs on things. So pretty much every time we release an update, they log in and then they disappear until the next update comes. And we have quite a few users in that boat. And do you honestly think that they give two hoots about paying market rates for a player when they log in? If they're sitting there, first time they logged in for a month or something, got 10 million, just want to buy a player, play one match with them before they, come back in a few weeks or something like that. Do you think they're just looking at the players who are available and just finding the one they want the most and just plonking down a bid, whatever it may be, because they don't care whether it's 1 million or 5 million. That's the thing, right? So, but then if it happens to be your player and it happens to be 5 million, it's like you've got this player, somebody bids 5 million, it's like, oh gosh, this guy's only worth 500,000, somebody's bid 5 million. If I accept this, people are going to think that I'm cheating. It's just not how all of the feelings are supposed to be, I don't think, and you want to be feeling.
That's it. No, I'm sure just everybody's been in this situation where they've sold a player for more than they think he's worth. I mean, most of us put speculative auto accepts on our players, don't we? Hope for the best, hope someone will pop in and bid a player. And I guess the nature of it at the moment allows people to just, who aren't particularly, aren't playing it daily, just come in and go, I fancy that player, and just go, how much is he? And then just buy. Whereas at least now, if they get this same kind of player, can come in and go, right, I fancy that player. How much is he from the available players market? Buy. And that doesn't hurt anyone, does it?
No, it doesn't matter how much he overpays. That's the thing, because it's not hurting anybody else. Except if they're overpaying, it's obviously not. It's at a disadvantage to themselves, but they're not giving an unfair advantage to anybody else. Because whilst you have some users who really focus on the long term and making sure that they don't overpay a single penny for anything, you've got other users who just care about today, tomorrow. I want this player, I want to win my next match. I'm not thinking about next month or the month after, or the fact that he's going to be a bit older later and he's going to be worth less. They're just not thinking in those terms. They're thinking much more short term. And when you've got people thinking short term like that, they're just not going to evaluate things in the same way as all the sort of more hardcore users who all tend to think obviously much longer term. So it's just a totally different type of evaluation, and it's going to just cause differences in valuations and all sorts of problems, in addition to the cheating. Obviously the cheating is a problem, but there's a lot of instances where you've got crazy bids that it's not cheating, it's just people bidding because they're just, for all the reasons we're discussing basically. And the new system means all of this stuff, which is a massive problem, is all not a problem anymore as well. And I think it's just so much less stressful for people who care what other people think as well. Even if nobody's going to accuse you of cheating, Steve, because you sold a player for $1 million profit, you could just be really distressed about the fact that somebody might even think it. Just you thinking that somebody else might think it can be extremely distressing in and of itself without anybody actually directly accusing you of it. So I think just the whole idea that you feel that, and many other people would as well who really care about what other people think of them, which is a lot of people, it's just very distressing, and it shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't. And sort of the reason I brought it up really is just, I was just using the example there, but I think I'm definitely not alone with that kind of feelings, and then the other CHs have come past and go, God, hope I don't get accused of cheating for this. I mean, it's just not the right. It's just not the right thing, is it? You don't want that kind of feeling from a game.
Yes, I think. I mean, obviously we can just go on and on about this, but we need to cover some other stuff in this podcast. And to some degree, the proof will be in the pudding with this, and people need to get their hands on it. They need to use it. Obviously, it's a bare bones of a system to begin with, and we'll go into that a bit later. But I mean, obviously, it's just the start point. So it's almost like you're starting. It's like the worst it's going to be, and then it's only going to get better over time from here as well. So even if it isn't that, even if people feel like it's, or however they feel, there's scope for it to be better. But I think even if it's bare bones of a start point without any feedback or any evolution over time or any balancing or anything like that, even in its bare bones initial format, I still think it's going to just be better for most people.
Okay, Nick, let's talk about something slightly different. Obviously, some people are going to ask the questions, what kind of effect are all these changes going to have on things like the national team's revenue, for example? Because obviously this is a fairly big change. Is that going to affect that side of things, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think undoubtedly in the short term it will have all these changes collectively will definitely have a negative impact on this feature in particular. As to exactly how negative, I think we'll see, I guess, in due course. But overall, these changes lay the foundation to have much more users in the game. And in pretty simple terms, if we had 20 times more users, that is going to make much more of a positive impact on the revenue that the national teams feature is going to generate than the negative impact being made right now on it, basically. So yeah, there's going to be, it's like taking one step backwards to take a few giant leaps forwards here, really, I think. And the national teams feature is part of that, in that, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a setback, but over the course, you know, if you're looking in a year's time or more even, I'm pretty sure this feature is going to be making way more money than what it currently is. You can hold me to that. And I did, I'm not sure how much attention people are paying to how much revenue was generated, but I mean, in the first month it was actually, I mean, there's a difference here between revenue and revenue as well, because hardly any actual revenue was generated. It was pretty much all tokens that people were given for monies that they'd previously paid, so it wasn't extra revenue. But in regards to what people can see in regards to the tokens paid, I think the first month was looking very, very, you know, was very good. It was quite high, but it's dipped very quickly. So if anybody's focusing on the fact that, you know, a few teams went for, you know, 400 or more tokens, I don't think in that first month, I don't think that's representative at all of what we would expect to happen in the following months. And it's not what happened last month, and I don't expect it to happen this month, basically.
I don't think anyone was expecting. I think everyone sort of took into account that, didn't they? That people just had a lot of tokens ready to use, and everyone wanted to get involved in the new feature straight away. I think I think that's probably fairly logical.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess the key point with that, really, in particular, is that it's clearly not going to single-handedly support this game financially. That feature. Sure. It's absolutely not going to. It's obviously a help, and we need to do things and get creative if we want to make any money at all, quite frankly. Whilst, you know, keeping the game how we want to keep it, we have to get extremely creative, and it is making some money, so that's positive. But at the end of the day, more is going to have to be done, and we have to continue to be extremely creative about how we can make money whilst keeping the game honest, so to speak. So the thing is, yeah, it will be a bit of a step back, but at the end of the day, like, it's not like it's totally broken something that was going to single-handedly save this project or anything like that.
Well, of course not. I think everyone, certainly I appreciate, I'm sure many other people listening to this appreciate, I think it's you've got to appreciate that this game works with loads of users, basically, doesn't it? And if there's changes being made to encourage more and more users, then things like this feature are just naturally, you know, through weight of numbers, it's just going to make more money that way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, correct. Well, that's what we believe anyway. Logic would dictate, if you had 100 times more users, that it would increase the demand for this and you make more money, basically. I think that's pretty sound logic. So, yeah, and it's absolutely vital that we do have more users. That's the reality. There is no future in this game if we can't increase the size of the current user base. That presumably that's an obvious fact that most people would be aware of. It's something we have to achieve. There's no point in planning on the basis that we won't achieve it. We need to plan on the basis that we need to do what needs to be done in order to actually get the users, and we also need to do what needs to be done in regards to making this project successful on the assumption that we do get those users. So there's no point to plan in the long-term future for this game to optimize it for having hardly any users. It needs to be optimized for actually having lots of users.
Agreed. And I think, I don't know if it's obvious, but it's obvious to me, this is the start point really for where we're actually, you know, getting rid of cheating effectively, getting rid of pretty much every way to cheat in this new transfer system. It's the start point to actually go and get these users, I think, isn't it? It's clearly there's more to be done, but this is something that simply had to be changed. This whole transfer system, and being cheat free is just massive for me. I'm sure for many people listening to this, that's just a great step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's huge. I mean, there's obviously the cheating in regards to how it impacts users, but in regards to how it impacts us, it's massive in regards to the scalability. The game has no scalability if we have to run around spending hours upon hours dealing with all of the problems that crop up because of it, and the amount of time that's spent in that, basically the amount of cheating that you have. For example, you get more cheating the more users you have. It doesn't scale at all, basically. It's a non-option for us to have 10 times more users on the basis that if we spent 10 times more time than we currently do dealing with all of these problems, we would literally have a negative amount of time that exists in the world, even if we did nothing else on this game at all. So it's something that was one of the major reasons why we couldn't actually actively do anything to get more users, is because it would have crippled the development of this game. If we doubled or tripled the size of the user base, say 6 months ago, there would be no future for this game, because we would be absolutely crippled by spending all of our time dealing with all the problems that come up to do with inter-user disputes and cheating and harassment and blah blah blah. So,
sure.
I mean, with the cheating, we've covered this a lot in the past, and there's a lot of information about it. So if you want to know more, you can check the podcast. There's this whole entire previous podcast just about the cheating issues in the game and cheating in general, and the problems associated with why it's basically impossible to fully stop it. The thing is that there's users who will think, why can't she just police it better? Why can't she just do more? And I think you could do more, but it doesn't matter how much more you do, which we've done a lot more, by the way, because you've only got to look at the transfer system that has been removed, and there's 20 or 30 or more even rules and all sorts of restrictions on new users and stuff to help curb the cheating. And obviously we're looking into investigating cheating, and in fact we've had users accounts reset for cheating in some type of mass collusion type cheating, which pretty certain that no other online football management game out there would have ever be punishing people, banning people, detecting that type of cheating. So we're detecting types of cheating that no other online football management games, I'm pretty sure, would be detecting. I mean, typically speaking, these other games would just be saying, are they on the same IP address? Yes, okay, they're cheating. No, okay, it doesn't matter how much they're cheating, they're not cheating, you're just going to get away with it. So all it really means is spend 5 minutes looking at a YouTube video to work out how to have multiple accounts on different IP addresses, if you don't already know how to do it. So there is a 5-minute overhead that you have to study, and once you undergo that 5 minutes of working out how to do it, you can then cheat to your heart's content, and you're never going to be punished for it. That's basically how the games work. On the flip side, you and your friends could be playing legitimately, having a network gaming night or something, Saturday night, beers, pizza, having a good time, playing your online football management game, and then you're all banned for cheating because you're playing on the same IP address, even though there was no cheating involved. So I think that's just unfair on both accounts, and this is typically the approach, or just simply being pay to win, by the way, which makes cheating somewhat redundant if you can just pay and beat everybody anyway. So if you either pay to win, in which case that's a good way to combat cheating, just being pay to win. People don't focus on how much cheating there isn't, they focus on how much cheating there is. And I'm not saying that people should be happy with cheating, by the way. We shouldn't be happy with cheating, users shouldn't be happy with cheating. The whole thing just undermines the competitive gameplay experience at a fundamental level. And this is why we've taken this road, because it would never have mattered how well we dealt with the cheating, as long as there was any cheating. And as alluded to on the forum post, it doesn't even matter if there isn't any cheating. Just this fact that it's possible to cheat, then somebody will be accused of cheating. But that's a problem, a bigger problem almost in some ways than the cheating itself anyway. And then you've got all of these negative emotions that were talking about before, about the fact that you receive this bid and stuff and you feel bad about it because somebody might think you're cheating, and that shouldn't be how you feel. So it doesn't matter if you weren't cheating, it doesn't matter if nobody's cheating. If it's possible, you've got all the problems to do with cheating anyway. So policing it and trying to put rules and restrictions and is ridiculous, because it's ridiculous from the perspective that if the point is to make people happy, because people won't be happy. And in many ways, these restrictions, they impact everybody, whether they're cheating or not. And a lot of people see that as, in a way, they're being accused of cheating or suspected of cheating themselves, and then they feel really bad about that as well. So you're making a lot of people, you're restricting the gameplay experience for a lot of people who aren't cheating in order to try and curb the cheating from those who are. The whole thing just has no way where you're ever going to reach a state that everybody's going to be happy with it. It's impossible.
Yeah, and it just gets worse with the more and more users you've got. And I know we've covered that kind of thing before and in the past, but it's just not scalable, is it? So you just
well, no, I mean,
just, your problem only gets worse. So
the idea that you're going to
this system is just it just gets rid of the whole side of things, doesn't it? I know people can argue for many different ideas of how it could all be curbed, but this just gets rid of it completely. So what's wrong with that?
I mean, I think, yeah, exactly. And most of these ideas really just some variation of just listen to me, and if I tell you they're cheating, then they're cheating, so just ban them. And I could be whoever, or a different person or something, but essentially it just hinges on the fact that it all comes down to a person's opinion. Which, how would you feel, Steve, if some random person felt that you were cheating, so therefore you're just banned for cheating because they said you are? I mean,
well, indeed, yeah, it's not good, is it? It's not good, and it's not good for the person who has to make. People talk about moderators and things like that, but how much abuse do moderators get in games? Who'd want to be a moderator? It's just, there's no benefit to it, is there? It's just here, I'm a target.
Well, no, it wouldn't be. You've got all the problems anyway, even with the moderator. That's the thing. It's like if somebody gets banned for, they're just going to go saying the moderator should be banned. They hate me personally. It's a personal attack. Blah blah blah. So you've got to deal with the fact that every time a moderator ever takes an action, you're going to have to deal with the fact that the moderator's then attacked. You're going to have to. You've got problem. The person. You've got all the problems associated with that. And you've also got all the problems associated with the fact that every time the moderator decides to not ban somebody as well. So it doesn't matter what they do. There's just a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation every single time they ever do anything. And it also gives an actual person, an actual face, an actual identity for people to focus their attacks on, their hatred on. If somebody is banned for cheating and they know that it was because of Steve, the admin, it's because of him, whether it was or wasn't doesn't matter, but the fact that they know that Steve could have, that he has the power to do it, it doesn't even matter if you didn't even do it, people would attack you. And I'm pretty sure that by virtue of everything we're saying, if it worked that way, that you would never have wanted to be an admin, Steve.
Oh, yeah,
you wouldn't want to deal with that situation. You just wouldn't want to deal with that. And I think, the types of people who would, find me an online football management game where the admins have the power to ban people for cheating, and there also haven't been problems with the admins themselves cheating. Find me a game where that's never happened, and find me a game where there also isn't accusations of the admins passing off information to other users about how to get away with cheating as well. So it's really just you give somebody the power, and we give people the power, and the expected outcome is that some people will definitely abuse it. It's just the ratio. Is it only one of them, or is it all of them, or is it something in between? And even if it's none initially, it could be somebody at a time. So you've then got obviously all the abuse. It's just problem after problem after problem, and we already have spent, even with this smaller user base, just insane amounts of time dealing with this. And
I think as you've alluded to in the past, a lot of it is to do with the fact that the whole system's designed for subscription based gameplay, which certainly would significantly reduce the cheating side of things, wouldn't it? Because if you have to pay, if you're effectively paying for subscriptions of all these accounts, it does make a difference, doesn't it? So so I don't think it can be blamed entirely. It's just the game, the format of the game's changed, and we have to adapt along with it, don't we? And this system, the new system, works a lot better for this type of game that the games have evolved into, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. In that, it works, as opposed to it just fundamentally doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I think, even the subscription issue aside, I think at a fundamental level, the fact that, you would have less cheating, but I think fundamentally speaking, people would still be unhappy with there being cheating in the game, even if there was less cheating. I think you're still going to have all the problems that come with it, even, because it's not about how much there is, it's just about the fact if there is any, then it's going to be problems. You're going to have people complaining about it, accusing the people of it, unhappy about it. And it really doesn't matter what percentage of, whether it's 1% or 2% or 3%, what difference does it realistically?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so, let's talk about the transition a little bit, Nick. I suppose it goes without saying that the transition is going to benefit some users more than others. I'm guessing there's not a lot you can do about that. I guess every change in the game, any change to the match engine is going to benefit some more than others. Any change to addition of a new feature that someone gets better than another person. I guess that's all changed. I suppose that's part and parcel of it. But do you think there's going to be a variance in the benefits, or?
Sure. There'll be a variance. When you make a change to a game, of course, it doesn't matter what it is. There are going to be winners and losers, and this is no different. Like you alluded to with our match engine, every time you change, there'll be winners and losers, and the thing is, you change the wages for older players up or down, or this or that, or you change how the progression works, or you introduce any new feature at any point in the future, whether stadiums or youth academies, or whatever it is. It's always going to benefit some people more than others. So I don't think there's any. We've already done things that cause that. This will cause that. We'll do more things in the future that cause that. There's no avoiding that. And having said all this, though, this is probably more on the bigger side of things in regards to the overall sort of impact. And I think maybe not in terms of raw impact, but in regards like a sort of underpinning impact in the long term. But I think it does it's more of a visible short-term impact, if that makes sense, in that you can see in a quantifiable way that this player's wages were this and now they're going to become this, and therefore I have to pay this player more or less wages, and therefore for this player it's worked out better or worse for me. And then if you're looking at, obviously you can look across your squad, but the thing is that doesn't really take into account the system and the long term and this and that. But that's the thing, if you're looking at there's just going to be a lot of individual isolated pieces of information that people will be able to see in every single player that they've got where their wages went up. They could feel bad about that, for example.
Probably find transfer values have probably gone up as well, though. So that's what it seems to me. Looking at it, I know this is a very general statement.
It is. We can make lots of general statements, but the thing is, there's just going to be exceptions all over the place. This is the thing, right? So I wouldn't be surprised at all for people to talk about them and raise them out of the woodwork. But we have made it so that if the player's value is less under the new system than the previous system, then you can sell him for the first month for his old value. So we have done
I think that's fair.
Something. Yeah. Obviously, when you say his old value, that's actually the lesser of what you paid for the player or his old market value, and that's I don't know how obvious the reasons for it, but it's basically just to be a bit fairer in regards to if there's artificial inflation of values of players, which is something that seems to have been going on to some degree, potentially a large degree, by the way, in the game, that all of those users who were engaged in that behaviour don't stand to gain a massive advantage under this new system, because they'll only be able to sell the player for what they paid for him, not for what they inflated the value to. On the same note, if you bought a player when he was 25 for 10 million and now he's 35, it would just be weird that you could sell him for 10 million. Still,
absolutely.
So that's why that's why it is that way. But broadly speaking, the wages have gone up a lot, particularly in the case of older players. And the wages are now more based on the sort of the ability of the player. So good older players, their wages, especially if you had them on minimum wage, they definitely will be going up. But also, the values will be going up. So in the case of older players where the wages have gone up, probably the values have gone up as well. So at least you've got the option to sell them for some money.
Yeah, you face the decision. You can get some cash for them if the wages are higher than you'd like them to be. So at least you can go well. Actually, he's not worth that much to me, really. I'm gonna sell him and then invest elsewhere.
The thing is, you can generalise, but there's exceptions all over the place, really. But the older players one in particular, I think, is a safer generalisation in that there are a lot of older players that were on minimum wages that were good, and now they won't be on minimum wages, but they will probably also were worth nothing, and now they won't be. Yeah, outside of that, I don't know if you can even make any generalisations, quite frankly. I think the wages, if you're talking about 16-year-old players, they will be less going forwards. The wages for youth players will be less going forwards. Some of them will be less now, but again, it really depends because it's based on their attribute points, their ability. So there's just going to be a lot of exceptions, really. But I think a lot of the ones that are on massively high wages, they will be reduced. But on the flip side, a lot of the youth players who are quite decent, but you manage to pick up for free on minimum wages, they might not be on minimum wages anymore. So some youth players will be more, some will be less. And right now there is like a real wage premium on those players in their mid-20s, if they're really good as well. That I think will, for the best players, will come down a bit. But right now you can also pick up quite reasonably solid players in the mid-20s, potentially minimum wages, and again, that won't be a thing. So I think it's sort of I think you're broadly saying all the really highly paid players, their wages might come down a bit, but then all the sort of solid, viable, decent players who you used to be able to get on minimum wage, many of those will not be on minimum wage anymore. So it's more of like there is now going to be, rather than basically every player. I mean, right now you've got players worth a lot, players worth nothing. There isn't a lot of players who are worth 1 million in the game as a percentage of what you think they would be, if that makes sense. Because either you're interested in a player, Steve, in which case he's worth a lot and all of the other top users in the game are interested in, or you're not, in which case he's worth nothing. And yeah, there are exceptions, but you would expect that the vast majority of players in the game would be worth between something and a lot. They would be worth more than nothing, but less than lots, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's what you would expect. So you'd expect that there would be some players worth nothing, some players worth a bit, some players worth a bit more than a bit, and so on and so forth, and some players worth a lot. And you'd expect there to sort of be this full spectrum with lots of players in between. And that's more what it's going to be like going forwards. So as you progress through the game, you would build your squad up slowly over time, rather than basically just having players that nobody else wants, having players that nobody else wants, having players that nobody else wants, and then eventually after X seasons being able to move into the bracket of having some players that other people actually want, and then get one of them, and then two of them, and then three of them, and then four of them. Instead of that, it would be more like you just start with your players and you just improve your team over time, including
gradually build, yeah.
Which I think is just much healthier for the game as a whole. And
continued progression, I guess, is the
continued progression in your squad development, which will be necessary in order to, well, not necessary, but it will be more important if you want to also get your continued progression on the pitch. Because right now you can sort of progress your squad without progressing your wages or paying any money or anything, and you can progress through the divisions and on the pitch. But I think now it'll be much harder to do that. You will have to spend at least some money, but then you will get promoted and you'll get more money. And I think that's just more natural. It's like you play, you win, you get some better players, you win some more, you progress, you go up. It's more competitive, you need a better team, you expect to pay more money to get a better team. That feels so much more natural than just pay nothing for the first 7 seasons until I eventually have made it far enough in the game to finally play properly and buy some extra players that people care about.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like there's a bit more balance with this. It does feel like it's going to be... I suppose that example you just gave there is probably the best one. Just, do nothing, bang, grab someone really good. So, yeah, I think this is better.
And it plays a lot into the transfer system, the changes as a whole, where it's more like you can do stuff. It's in your power to do stuff. It's you put the time and the effort to find the player, you get the player, rather than this very passive thing where partly as a new user you might not get the players because you choose to do nothing, but partly because it's not in your power to actually do anything. You simply can't buy these players that other people want because you can only bid for one at a time, and you're unlikely to get him, and you don't have the resources to bid on many of them at once to give yourself a chance to pick the odd one up. So I think it's partly choice, but it's also partly forced upon them, and I think it's just not healthy for the game as a whole.
I think the answer's probably fairly obvious here, but I think it's worth talking about anyway. I mean, you're going to get asked. We're going to get asked, why did we not give people advance notice of the change in transfer system? I think the answer probably is obvious, but clearly it could be used to people's advantage, I would guess.
I mean, there's obviously a lot of things to do with the stability and the fact that it would have created a lot of uncertainty and people would have been distressed, and people want to know where they stand, and they wouldn't have known. And if you had told everybody where they stood, which is kind of what you would have had to do, if you were going to tell people in advance of this, you needed to actually tell them what was going to happen, how it was going to impact them, and what, which in turn would have said, this is what you need to do if you want to cheat for the last time, basically. It would have been sending out all of the information, all of the signals for everybody who wants to cheat. This is your last chance saloon. Please cheat as much as possible this month, knowing that you will probably you won't be able to cheat again. So if you're going to move that money over, you need to do it now, type of thing. And that's the one of the main reasons really is that the whole point of this is to get rid of the cheating, not to have saturated the game with all-time high levels of cheating for a month before we moved into that. And we just didn't want to give the people involved in cheating that massive advantage is one of the biggest reasons. But also that side, it just there's very little benefits to destabilising the game for the average user would have just enjoyed it more, not in the way that it's been done, in that they just played the game in the way that they knew, and now it's changed and they're told exactly how it's changed, and now they know exactly where they stand, and now they can play the game differently rather than having to stress about everything that's going to happen and that all the speculative things that would happen, and then in turn the users who came out of that might be accused of cheating as well, even if they weren't, and all of the problems. But one of the biggest ones really is that we just didn't want to. Why would you want to tell everybody if they're going to cheat? This is the last month that you can do it. It doesn't.
Okay.
Which is what we would have essentially been doing. So that's the main reason, really.
Okay. I know you some users probably think that the 9 Minute Fever cares more about new users than existing users a little bit, but I think the truth is probably the opposite, isn't it? The new user experience has become, it's just become compromised because of some of the changes made to deal with some of these problems with the transfer system, isn't it? The restrictions placed upon new users that are actually there really to help combat cheating, which is, effectively existing users using second accounts, I guess, in most cases.
Yeah. It's horrible. I mean, the new user experience is, I think, disgraceful is fair. The whole new user experience is largely engineered around assuming that they're the second account of somebody else, and that we have to try to make cheating not too easy, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's like really ruined the experience. And I mean, the new user experience typically looks something like this. Like they start playing the game and they want to buy a player, but they can't because they have to play 5 matches before they can. So they try to play those matches, and they will, and get hammered 10-0 or something, because in order to find them, they're going to have to play against experienced users. And they can't do anything to avoid that horrific defeat because they can't actually sign any players. So they're forced to go with their starting squad to play against you, or who knows, Steve, and then they get absolutely obliterated. And they've got to do that 5 times over. I'm pretty sure by that point, 90-something% of people will have already quit the game. But if they persevere, then they finally get to the point where they can sign a player. So they're going to go and look, and they're going to find all the players that are available in negotiation or whatever, and the one that's the best that they want, and then bid. But of course they're not going to get that player, because all the best ones are all the players that all the long-term users are interested in, and they're all going to go for millions, but new users not going to know that. So they're going to bid. They're not going to have much money. They're going to bid. So they're going to have to bid all of their money, which means they can only make one bid. Then they're going to have to make it 24 hours to find out that they didn't get the player and had no hope of ever getting the player, so it was a waste of time. And then they're going to repeat and rinse 10 or 20 times over, by which point an entire calendar month might have elapsed, and they still don't have a decent player in their squad. And eventually they'll work it all out and resign to the fact that they have to sign players that they're not happy to sign or something. But it's just
but not enough people are going to make it that far,
horrible.
Are they? That's the thing.
I mean, who is? Yeah. I'm surprised anybody makes it that far, quite frankly. I mean, to say the new user experience is absolutely horrific. I think the most surprising thing of all is that we actually do have new users playing this game. We actually do have people willing to persevere through that experience, that really terrible experience. So I think the actual new user retention figures, all things considered, are very good. And then you just have to wonder, if we actually gave them a decent experience as a new user, how much better that could be.
Yeah.
But right now the experience is just horrific. Whereas obviously under the new system, they just search the available players list. They'd have all the prices, they'd see how much money, and if they want somebody that they found, they can just click buy and they just get them. And that whole experience of going through the 24-hour negotiation process is going to be really frustrating for existing users as well. I think the main difference with new users is that they will be, one, they have a lot less funds, so they can't bid on many at once to sort of spread their eggs into many baskets and win the odd ones. That's not an option to them. And two, I think existing users have some kind of an idea about the fact that they've got an actual hope in hell of winning them and bid accordingly, whereas new users aren't going to have that point of reference. They're not going to know. They're not going to know the fact that they bid all this money on this one negotiation that they have absolutely no chance of winning, and it's a total waste of time. But yeah, it's just really bad, and at the end of the day, we can scrap all of this, because now if somebody creates a second account and they want to go in and buy some players from the pool, okay then, why not? Basically. Doesn't impact anybody else, doesn't hurt anybody else. So we don't have to worry about the fact that somebody might create a second account and cheat, because basically they won't be able to cheat, at least not with the transfer system. And therefore we can focus on making the new user experience optimized for, giving the users enjoyment in the game, retaining them, rather than assuming that they're a second account of somebody else trying to cheat and delivering a horrible experience.
And let's face it, there are a hell of a lot of users in this game who like to have a second account and play completely fairly. But maybe they want to do a One Nation team or something like this. It changes nothing for them, does it? It's just carries on, and they can carry on doing exactly what they want, and it's a lot easier actually, in fact, to under this new system. Whereas the only people that are going to be really affected by this are people who maybe want to negatively affect other people, I guess, but i.e. maybe cheat or.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are a few people who will negatively impact. So, I mean, obviously, those who are cheating, this is going to have a massive negative impact for those who want to cheat. It's like a horrible system for those who want to cheat. But there are other people who aren't cheating, I think, that it will negatively impact. I mean, I think some people genuinely like the process of chatting to somebody to negotiate the deal or whatever. But at the end of the day, it could kind of be gazumped by anybody at any point anyway, because I can negotiate to buy your player for however much I want, Steve, but at the end of the day, I may not get your player. So that's just frustrating anyway. But I think, some people kind of enjoy that side of things, but
I think most people who do enjoy that will all appreciate the fact that it takes the cheating out of the game, though. It's just, yes, there is a small negative from that point of view if you enjoy that side of things, but surely the massive positive that you're on a level playing field because other people doing the same things are not cheating when they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so as well. I guess there's also, you got your salesmen as well, the people who can market their players well and, accidentally post in the world chat one of their players are for sale instead of the appropriate one, or spam the channels, or get on to talking to new users saying, hey, I've got all of these fantastic players that are going to help you out, and all of that sort of behaviour, which can pay some pretty decent dividends at the moment, obviously will all be gone. So for the people who enjoy the salesman type thing where they employing various sales tactics like that, that I guess it might not be good for them as well. But the difference between you legitimately selling your player for twice as much as it's worth, or somebody cheating to sell a player for twice as much as it's worth, the difference is almost non-existent from the perspective that you can't prove that whatever's the case either way anyway. So it all lays in the eye of the beholder, basically. So at the end of the day, I think that whole way to sort of play the game, it needed to go anyway. So if it wasn't with this system, it would have been with some other changes anyway, basically. It just creates too much grief for people. It creates grief for the person who, say you onto a new user who might pay $2 million for your player and then discovers that he could have signed a better player for free, for example. It makes that person upset and feels like they have to start the game again or something. And it also makes everybody else in the game upset that this person has managed to sell their player for $2 million when they can't sell their players for anything who are better, type of thing. So it doesn't only ruin the experience for the person that you've ripped off, for the lack of a better word, but also ruins experience for a lot of other people who just are upset to see that some users can sell their players for what they deem to be unfairly high amounts compared to their own players. So I think it just really creates a lot of grief. So I think this whole way to essentially be able to sell your players for a lot more than what other users can sell their players for, conceptually that didn't really have any long-term future in the game anyway.
I think we touched on this already. I mean, we talked about, we've just been talking about how this change is good for new users and, in turn, for existing users. I mean, how about for the team itself? There's a lot of time spent monitoring this kind of thing. I know we did touch on this a little already, but that's got to be a big time saver with this new system, I would think.
Oh, huge! I mean, huge. I mean, you're basically talking about from having an overhead that will have increased proportionally to the user base increasing, which meant that we couldn't increase the user base, as discussed already, to a transfer system that might require some technical support when there's a bug or something like that. But also, do you think there's more bugs under the old system with the 50-odd rules that it had, or do you think there'll be more bugs under the new system?
Indeed, yeah.
So there's going to be less technical support required, way less, and no functional support almost, because you can't cheat. So you removed all the whole needing to deal with that side of things. So yeah, from our perspective, it's just way better and allows us to spend what was really a disturbingly huge amount of resources that was reaching kind of embarrassingly high proportions if you look at it all over time that has been spent on this side of things, to not have to spend it going forwards and instead be able to spend on other things. And at the end of the day, as a long-term proposition, keeping the current transfer system and using all of our resources dealing with cheating and never being able to have more users, or not having cheating, having a lot more users and being able to add a lot more features to the game, including the new match engine, as a long-term proposition, one guarantees the project will fail and the other gives the project an actual hope of being successful, a real hope. So it's a no-brainer pretty much in that regards. And there's very limited amount of time that we can actually save. I mean, most of the things that we do, we have to do each month, if that makes sense. A lot of the things, I mean, so we have no choice but to fulfill like our tax obligations and our legal obligations and supporting the game, keeping it up and running, and the month-end season finishing we have to do every month. We have to keep the game up and running all the time, basically 24/7. And we have to provide technical support to people that have problems. We can't choose to not do any of those things. We have to do them all. So there's a very limited amount of things that we really are doing on a monthly basis that we don't have to be doing. And, looking into all the cheating and into user disputes is some of that time that can be saved. As well as you save a lot of time from not raiding all the Reborn Legend players, for example. So that's another area where, at the end of the day, that was a choice. We could choose to do it or choose not to do it. And essentially, we are now all the things that we don't sort of have to do, we're choosing to not do, I guess you could say, and instead spend all of that time actually progressing the development of the game, and only continue to sort of do the monthly routine or monthly maintenance type tasks, the overheads, if you like, just the ones that we don't have any choice, the ones that we have to do, basically. We're going to continue to do them. And this isn't just these things in isolation. This is obviously, like, for example, we removed the beta world, so this is another example of us not committing or spending resources doing things every month that we don't have to be spending, if that makes sense, and instead trying to progress the development more of the game.
Sure.
Yeah, I think with the new transfer system, the old one was very convoluted. The new one is obviously much straightforward. It will never be as convoluted as the previous one, ever. We'll never go there again. But it doesn't mean that it will, can't be expanded or enhanced over time. It's very intentional that the start point is cheat-proof, is straightforward, has no flaws, has no problems, is clean as the start point, and that we can get feedback from people and see the engagement and see, I say no flaws, but no critical inherent flaws inbuilt into it, nothing that couldn't be solved by some balancing changes, if you know what I mean. No
Sure.
rules that are inherently flawed, and that we can basically get it, improve it, and listen to what people have to say. And it doesn't mean that we couldn't add complexity to it over time, but where we do, we would want that complexity to also add gameplay and meaningful gameplay as well.
And you'd want it to be intuitive as well,
Yeah.
of course. So you don't need this degree to understand things, of course.
The current way that the game was set up, it just created way too much noise and way too many problems that we needed to constantly react to, and we really should be instead keeping our eye, on the overall goal of actually developing this game, of actually having it a viable game that can exist in the future. We really should be focusing on that if we're going to have any chance of actually being able to achieve that. And unfortunately, the reality is that we've just spent embarrassingly huge amounts of time and resources dealing with all these problems, and the problems that don't really have to exist in this game, problems that just exist because of the systems. And we just, I guess you could just say we're spinning plates and juggling balls at the same time and trying to balance on a tightrope, and you're trying to keep everybody happy. And but the obvious truth is that we can't. It's impossible. We can't keep everybody happy. And in fact, we can't really keep even anybody, not even a single person, entirely happy. Really, everybody's going to have a problem at some point about at least one thing. it's a war that just can't be won trying to keep everybody happy. It's impossible. And literally every single user we have is going to have their own ideas about how the game should work and what they want it to be, and they're going to have, from their own perspective at least, what they feel the problems with it are, and from their own perspective, in many cases they will be correct in their assessment of what the problems are. They would be correct from their own perspective of what the problems are from their own perspective, if that makes sense, what they care about as being the problems in the game. But the thing is that everybody has different views on all of these things, and that there are a lot of problems that exist that are really fundamental that some people might not care about at all. Like the cheating, for example. It's possible there are some users out there that really they don't actually care that much that some people are cheating, because they just focus on themselves. They're not focusing on what's happening around them. But just because you don't care that there's cheating in the game doesn't mean that it's not fundamental. So, we make changes, and many users are going to get really worked up about the specifics of how all of these individual gameplay elements work and all the individual mechanics work, and exactly whether or not each individual element or each individual mechanic suits their own personal preferences for how they all think it should work. But at the end of the day, we just got to look at the bigger picture here, which is that the specifics of how these mechanics work is far less important than actually achieving the goal of delivering this competitive online environment, in a game where we sort of stick to our ideals and deliver sort of a genuine experience, if you like. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's going to be very hard to do that. No one's ever done it before, not successfully at least. And successful is kind of a pretty critical component here into actually doing it. I guess you could say that the deck's sort of stacked against us here to some degree, but we have to be creative. We have to find solutions to the problems, and many of which are just inherently sort of caused by the fact that it is a competitive game, and that is very much fighting against the grain by nature. And with where sorry, Steve, you're right.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's it. I mean, the game, as long as you learn from where you want to take the game, as long as the end goal is still attainable and still there, you learn how best to reach that goal, don't you? And it appears to me, yes, there's probably things that could have been done differently, and clearly there's time been spent on things that probably shouldn't have been spent on. But all you can do is put that right. And this feels like the first major change that is literally to make sure that there's something in place that just works long term, doesn't take up too many resources, and just allows you to get on. Yeah,
exactly. But I guess we have learned a lot as well. We've got a lot of feedback, mountains and mountains of it, and we do take it all into account. Just because somebody makes a specific suggestion and we don't do that specific thing doesn't mean people interpret that as not having listened to them. Just because you don't do what somebody says doesn't mean you didn't listen to what they had to say. And quite often, everybody wants something different, but we listen to everybody and we try to just, it's very hard to make something that works for people, quite frankly, when it really is fighting so much against the grain. It's very clear that we've got to reduce the levels of inter-user tension. It's consuming too much resources, it's creating too many problems. I think if you want this competitive game where people play matches against each other, and it is skill-based and isn't pay to win, if you want this type of game, then that's going to inherently create friction and problems, because in order for you to win, somebody else had to lose, and that's just going to be there, unfortunately. If we could demean losing so that really isn't that bad if you lose, or you don't care if you lose. But it's pretty much impossible to do that without also making it so that winning is meaningless then as well. And so if you want to sort of keep this competitive type game, which we do, then I think outside of the match experience and outside of directly pitting against head-to-head with somebody and the inevitable friction that's going to come out of that, outside of that, the rest of the game needs to try to piss people off as least as possible, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the rest. You're going to get people happy and unhappy when they win or lose matches. If you take that away, then what is the point of the game? You want something competitive, don't you? I don't want to just plod along and just win games automatically. It's a waste of my time. I want to have to work to do well and work to think my way into winning matches. And if I get outplayed and lose, so be it. But you want to be able to. If you take the competitive aspect of the game out, then it makes it a little bit pointless. It's the whole beauty of this game, and it's why I think that everyone likes it. You know, there may be faults in the game, but you definitely, everyone likes it because you get to pit your wits against other people in a fair environment. I think that's largely agreed that it is a fair environment. Yeah, people will complain about the match engine and things like that, but everyone's got playing with the same match engine. There's no differences there, and I think exactly what you're saying there, that if you're going to have this tension between users where you're playing, the main aim of the game is to win football matches effectively and therefore try and win your trophies and stuff like that. But if you just make sure the whole rest of the game is a really enjoyable experience to be involved in, and then I think you can take the fact that you might lose the odd game, just to, you just want to be enjoying your time online, don't you? I think that's the bottom line, really.
Yeah, but the current transfer system, the one that is no longer in the game, really doesn't. It does create a lot of frustration for people in and of itself. This is the thing. A lot of tension, a lot of frustration. The cheating is one obvious bit, but just simply the process of spending 2 hours looking for the player that you really want and then bidding, having the chance to bid accepted, and then missing out on the player is just really frustrating experience, and all of that will be gone. So essentially but in saying that, the new system will still be super competitive to get the players. It's just that in order to get them, the whole experience will be much less frustrating. That's the main thing.
Okay, so Nick, when the game was first launched, obviously it had a subscription model, and that a lot of the I guess the transfer system and various other features in the game were designed to sort of work around that. Been a lot of changes at a project level, clearly. How's that affected things?
Yeah, I mean, nothing short of catastrophically, pretty much. The whole game was designed to have a monthly subscription model. We've touched upon some of this, but we'd have way less cheating, for example. You'd have way less inactive users, which is another big problem for this game, what to do with the inactive user accounts. But under a monthly subscription model, not many people would choose to pay a monthly subscription fee but not actually play the game anymore, pretty much. Like, that'd be a pretty rare thing. And at the end of the day, the definition for an active user would be very simple. It'd just be, are they paying a monthly subscription fee? If yes, then they're active, full stop. And if no, then they're inactive. So that would have been very simple. We also would have been receiving a monthly revenue stream to help cover all the costs and this revenue stream was assumed into the business model for the game in order to be able to sort of maintain the level of data that's held in this game, which is, compared to any other free-to-play online football management games out there, they hold nothing compared to the amount of statistics and data and stuff that we hold. And it was assumed that we would be sort of covering, people would be paying a monthly fee, and part of that would be used to sort of cover the maintenance of all of this processing and data that we need to do and keep for them to keep the team in the game, which we don't get, which has had a massive impact because it wouldn't be viable. So we've had to basically re-engineer a lot of the game over the past couple of years. So basically do work that had already been done and make changes to the game in order or to provide any possible future for the game where it could survive without these monthly subscriptions from everybody to keep them in the game. And then with the Reborn Legends feature, we had a bigger team. We had as many people as we possibly could have at one time without getting too much in each other's way, working on the other main high priority features that we wanted, including the new match engine. And because of the fact that we were at capacity with all the main features, we decided to put the Reborn Legends feature in, for example, and it never would have taken priority over getting the match engine in, for example. But now, actually, it's holding back getting the match engine and other features into the game, and it's just not something we ever would have actively chosen to have done. We never would have made that conscious decision. We never would have decided to implement it to begin with if we didn't have spare capacity. We never would have decided to implement it if we had have known that it would have been us rating all of the players every month, spending a measurable percentage of our total available development resources doing that. It was never the intention that it would work that way. It was always the intention that these players would be rated by the user base and it would be like a community type driven feature, but it just never panned out that way, and that's covered on the forum post, more details on that. So I think the changes really are huge in regards to the fact that we've had to rebuild much of the game that we'd already built. We've had to change much of the game design, which involves work. We've still had to support the game throughout this entire period, despite receiving no monthly revenue stream to do so. In a functional context, actually providing our time to support it, but we've also had to cover all of the server costs to run the game for all of the past 2 years without these monthly subscriptions, which has been really substantial. So I think, in summary, catastrophic would really be the term to describe the impact that has had on the project. So catastrophic that it's almost hard to believe that we still have a chance to be successful and that we haven't already failed. It really is that big a deal, I think. You're basically talking about years of work being flushed down the toilet because of that, and having to redo stuff and having to completely change everything and support and cover the server costs to run the game for the entire period whilst doing so, and to achieve that with a much smaller team. I think it's just a massive setback, but all we can really do is look to the future here. I mean, at the end of the day, it's happened, and at the end of the day, it's not an option for the game because it doesn't work. And I think, by and large, we don't know for a fact that all we know is that we built the game to work with that model. We don't know that it would have been successful, obviously. All we know is that it could have. The fact that we didn't even get a chance to try was a massive setback for this project that was very difficult to survive. It might have been the case that we still got the match engine in and everything, and it might have been the case that there just weren't enough people in the world that were interested in paying a monthly subscription to pay this game, and that its long-term future may have lay in going down a different path anyway. But it would have been much easier to deal with a setback of that nature, if that makes sense, because you wouldn't have been having to redo everything from scratch at that point. You would have been able to improve the game. You might not have had as many users as you wanted to have in order to be viable in the long term, but you would have been able to cover your immediate server expenses and things at least, which we haven't been able to actually do. So, huge deal. And I guess the good side of this, though, is that probably it's true to say that the world has moved increasingly more and more away in a gaming perspective from a monthly subscription model anyway. It had already moved quite away from that 2 years ago, quite frankly, and there is a very real chance that it may not have worked anyway, basically. So yeah, it wasn't ideal and it was a huge setback and stuff, and ideally it would have all been different. But at the end of the day, it may not have worked even if everything hadn't have gone wrong. I think it just would have meant at a personal level, everything would have been way easier, basically, and a lot more progress would have been made. And I think there would have been a lot less our lives would have been a lot less, well, it would have involved a lot less hardship, and that would have involved a lot less frustration for the user base as a whole over the last couple of years. But it doesn't. But just because all of those things wouldn't have happened, doesn't mean that everything would have been hunky dory, so to speak, and that you wouldn't have had no problems.
Just the problems that came up.
Yeah, I just think obviously when we're launching, what do you want? When we're at that point in time, what do you want to be doing? Do you want to be rebuilding all your game from scratch and not having any money and any revenue and covering all of these server expenses and supporting your game with no revenue, or do you want to be finishing the match engine? The new match engine, for example. It's just the case that all the priorities had to shift in such a way that, had our hand forced to totally change all these priorities in such a way that, quite frankly, were very suboptimal, let's say, for the average user in regards to what they would have wanted to see as a priorities for the game.
So in short, Nick, basically there's just lots of reasons why this game it could have failed. But the fact is, it's still here, it's still going strong, and it's still improving. Yeah,
I think, that's a good fact to take away. We're still highly motivated to succeed. Totally, a lot is happening, say, behind the scenes, but also development-wise, make it sound like nothing has happened. I think a lot has happened still. It's just not stuff that is very visible to a lot of users. A lot of it is really around the fact that we've, touched upon it, but it's, improving the server situation, which is unworkable without the monthly subscription model. So you can't have a solution that's impossible to succeed with. So we're highly motivated to succeed. We've done a lot of the foundation work to allow us to succeed. There are a lot of fundamental issues with the game that we need to solve. The game very much fights against the grain, and we have to find a way to do that in a way that is, for lack of a better word, palatable, maybe, for the average person. And, we want to provide a, sustainable and competitive and fair, and no cheating plays a lot into fair and serious. And I think it's hard to have a serious and a meaningful game if there's cheating as well. So I think we want to provide this type of experience and nobody else provides that in an online football management game.
And I think the users listening to this got people, anyone who's listening to you and I rambling on all this time clearly cares about the game and clearly cares about about its survival. And these changes are all strategic, long-term decisions, aren't they? That they may have a negative short-term impact on the user base, particularly in the sort of transition of things, but it's just clear that the game has to scale so much better than it does now. There's so many parts of the game that just don't scale to hundreds and thousands of users, which this game needs to, and the game needs to attract and keep hold of users much better than it does.
Yeah, absolutely. The type of scalability that needs to be achieved is totally different if the game isn't monthly subscription based. It's almost like an entire different order of magnitude that's required here, almost that extreme. But you're definitely talking about huge sort of, you don't need double the amount of users, for example, if it's not monthly. So you're going to need way more than that. You're talking more into the realms of we might have needed X thousand to survive before, but now we're going to need many, probably quite frankly, tens of thousands of users minimum, tens of thousands of active users minimum to have any chance, if you're talking about over the long term, it's any chance, but I guess of any chance of sort of having the game realise its full potential, if you like. So, I guess we know that, these changes now won't be to everybody's personal taste. It's probably pretty obvious. Unfortunately, undoubtedly, there's going to be some people who quit playing the game. Presumably, at least a few are going to. But we're also, we've touched upon this, but we don't, changes had to be made to this game. You can debate till the cows come home to some degree exactly what those changes should have been, but I think there is no debating that some changes had to be made. And we're confident overall, though, that even in the shorter term, that the gameplay experience will be far superior to what it is now for the vast majority of users. And I think there are a lot of people who will be very happy to hear that cheating is gone. And there are a lot of people who have quit this game or play this game less or enjoy this game less or are thinking about quitting this game because of the cheating. And there are a lot of people who would very much like to see more development being done, if more development was done and more features were added to this game sooner rather than later, they'd be very happy for that to happen. People rarely quit this game, that's a fact. I mean, there are people who play and quit, people who play have this terrible new user experience and aren't willing to undergo the many-month grind that it takes to actually understand how to play the game. But once they've undergone grind, it's more like torture, really. Once they've undergone that experience of having to go through those initial months to actually understand how to play the game, once you strip those users out in isolation, those users very rarely permanently quit the game. They all actually come back, pretty much. We know that even the people who quit now, a percentage of those will come back in the future. And I think that overall, if you're talking about people quitting the game for whatever reasons they've quit the game, related to this change or related to other changes or in the past or whatever, there's far more chance of them becoming users again in the future if when they try again in the future, we have other features added to the game, like the new match engine, for example, than it is that we try to spend all of our time dealing with cheating, dealing with people arguing with each other and people being angry and stuff. Somebody comes back in 6 months and they don't see any measurable progress in terms of how they measure progress. So I think all in all, people who quit, they tend to come back again in the future. Sometimes start playing again, sometimes not. But people who quit, they tend to keep tabs on the game still. That's the main thing here. They don't quit and never come back. So they're still there to be gotten back should the game work for them and should the game make the progress that they need to see at some point in the future.
So I guess coming towards the end of this call, but I guess we should expect a bit of a transition period over the next couple of months as the user base adjusts to the changes and having different amounts, getting used to the fact of the different sort of values and wages and how it all works. But I think people, once you get over the initial shock, I can't do inter-user transfers. Once you get over that, you sort of realise that the fact that cheating's not there, sort of, it's just so massive for the game. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how that is. In terms of the new transfer system, I'm guessing you're expecting people to make a lot of suggestions how to improve it, just build on this base.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get a lot of suggestions. Obviously, we won't do all of them, but we will read all of them. We'll listen to them. Obviously, we don't want to add, like we're saying, we don't want to make it convoluted and complicated for no reason. But the fact is that it's a huge deal to not have cheating in the game, and there's a lot of things that were totally off limits just because, like a lot of design space, a lot of ideas were just off limits because I can't do that. Cheating. Nope, cheating. Not an option. Cheating. Like the amount of conversations we've had where it's just, cheating, basically. End of conversation. Idea dead in its sort of phase of being born. And now there's all of these things that people have previously suggested and all of this design space that really opens up now to add things to the game that wasn't previously possible and wasn't actually previously possible to not only add but wasn't even possible to really conceive, if that makes sense, to even think of, because it was just off the table because of the cheating, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of options that come in to be able to do things with this game now, and it's very hard. I mean, we talk ages, and I think we're coming to the end here, but I think this will become more obvious as some time progresses and these suggestions start to roll in, the types of suggestions that we wouldn't have received before.
Because I guess it's not only ideas from the team, it's ideas from other people that suddenly actually now that's a possibility, because not having to consider cheating just makes such a big difference, doesn't it? If you just go, well, there's no cheating, so you don't have to worry about it. I know that I'm repeating what you're saying, but it is a big thing, isn't it? It's
so big, and I think it's very hard because it's something that is more like a 1 or 2 hour conversation by itself. So it's very hard to, if you can't quite wrap your head around why it's such a big deal. it's going to be hard for us to convince you on this podcast. But I think as the suggestions roll in, I think it will be more obvious. There's just so many things that weren't available, and half of the suggestions probably that anyone's ever made, if you look at the forum thread for it, the idea ends up dead because somebody says, "Nah, cheating," basically, idea dead, and it's a real big deal, really.
Okay, well, I think we're just about there. I mean, we've committed a great deal of time to ensure that the logic, the reasoning, and the information contained in the announcement and the Q&A has been done, as much depth and clarity that we're able to do so. I know Nick and the team and everybody would appreciate your patience in the transition. Hopefully, some users will feel disappointed at the changes. Some users will be really, really pleased. Me personally, I'm just delighted with the no cheating thing. I'm sure I know, a few others will be joining me in that one. But try and my thoughts are to try and get past that initial feeling of not being able to do inter-user transfers and just realise the possibilities this all opens up. I can think of a few things off the top of my head that I'd love to see come into the game that feel like they might actually be possible now. So I'm sure you guys listening to this are probably thinking the same way.
Just to clarify on Steve's point, the reason why we can't say these suggestions, by the way, is because we've learned from past experience that every time we ever float a random idea out there, it comes back that somebody then on the forum posts that so-and-so said that this is definitely happening, kind of thing. And, these ideas are just literally ideas, but we can't say them because then we inherently seem to get permanently held to every random thing we might have ever said.
So you saying I really shouldn't talk about what my ideas are, Nick? Is that basically what you're saying? Yeah, I think you're probably right. Okay, all right. Thanks ever so much for your time, Nick. I think we'll wrap that up for what we wanted to cover. Hopefully, it's given you a reasonable idea of how the new system works. We'll post a link up to this on the forum as always. Do have a good read through the Q&A and the general topic. I know it's a lot to get your head around. If you've got any suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover in podcast, do let us know. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.